All right, let's dive into this. Who hasn't had that annoying one-sided sore throat, right? It's so weird how it seems to hit one side way worse than the other.
Yeah, it's a really common experience.
So today we're gonna really get into WHY that happens. We're going way past, oh, you've just got a cold.
Definitely.
We got this article someone sent in, and it's actually got some fascinating stuff in it. This isn't just like listing symptoms, it's the mechanisms behind it all.
It's really interesting, yeah.
So full disclosure, before we get too deep, we're going to be talking about infections and stuff, but obviously this isn't medical advice, okay? Think of it more like behind the scenes of your own body.
Exactly.
So the article jumps right into the most common culprits, and of course, infections are right up there. Makes sense.
Of course. And it's interesting. This really highlights how our bodies are not symmetrical. Like we think of ourselves as mirrored, but internally it's a whole different story.
That's true. You'd never really think about it.
And that asymmetry actually explains why having something like a sore throat, feeling it more on one side, is more common than we might realize.
Huh. I never even thought about it like that. So the article talks about how knowing if it's viral or bacterial is key to getting the right treatment, which makes sense. Like, huge difference between a cold and, say, strep throat.
Absolutely. Huge E difference. And this is a good reminder for everyone listening, even just thinking about how these infections spread in the first place. Something as simple as washing your hands well and often, it makes a huge difference.
For sure. And speaking of fighting off those infections, anyone listening ever notice how it's like one side of your neck gets all tender and swollen?
The lymph nodes, hard at work. They're like little warriors in there all over your body, filtering out the bad stuff. And since they often cluster together, it totally makes sense that you'd feel that swelling more on one side.
That makes you appreciate those little lymph nodes, huh? Okay, let's talk about my personal nemesis, post-nasal grip. You know that feeling like something's always dripping down the back of your throat? Ugh. Anyway, the article says even that can be one-sided.
It's true. It can. And it all comes back to those sinuses. We kind of forget about them until they're a problem, but they're not symmetrical either. So it's totally normal for that drainage, that annoying drip, to be worse on one side just because of how your sinuses are shaped.
Okay, but what about when it feels like more than just a cold, you know? The article had some other things that can cause this one-sided throat pain, and some of them were surprising.
Oh, yeah, there are definitely things people might not think about right away.
Yeah, like tonsillitis. I thought that was like a kid thing.
A lot of people do.
But apparently adults can get it too, and one-sided pain is a big sign.
It makes sense if you think about it. Your tonsils, they're right there at the back of your throat, each side.
Right.
So if one gets all inflamed, you're going to feel that more on that side. Makes sense.
Totally. Okay, this next one from the article sounded kind of scary. Peritonsillar abscess.
Yeah, that one sounds worse than it is, usually.
Yeah.
Basically, it can be a complication of tonsillitis, where this pocket of pus forms near your tonsil. It's important to get that checked out quickly if you think that's what's going on. The article's right about that.
Definitely don't want to mess around with that. Okay, this one really surprised me. GER.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like heartburn, right. I wouldn't have thought it would cause throat pain.
You might not think so, but it can. And it can even be one-sided.
Wow, I had no idea.
And this is where it gets interesting. Remember those lifestyle things we talked about before? Smoking, what you eat, even some medications?
Yeah.
Those can all make GERD worse, and then that can show up as throat pain. So if someone's dealing with this a lot, it's worth thinking about those things.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, but the article did mention a few other causes, some a little scarier. And like one that's hard to ignore these days is COVID, right?
Right. And it just goes to show you really got to stay up to date on this stuff. We hear about all these COVID symptoms, but it can be sneaky. Sometimes it's just a sore throat.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, it might just be on one side. So like, if there's any doubt, even if it seems mild, getting tested is always a good idea.
Totally. Better safe than sorry. Okay, this next one, I was not expecting this. Canker sores. I thought those were those little things you get, like in the front of your mouth.
Most people think that, and it's true, they're more common up front. But here's the thing, they can happen further back too. And depending on how big it is, where it is, it can totally make swallowing hurt.
Huh, who knew? So you might feel that more on one side. Wild. Okay, so the article did mention a few things that are less common, but obviously we should touch on them, like injuries to your throat, certain nerve problems,
Yeah.
even in rare cases, cancer.
Right. It's definitely important to remember those, even though they're less likely. If it's really bothering you, not going away, better to get it checked out.
Absolutely. So big picture here. It seems like most of the time, a one-sided sore throat is nothing to freak out about, right?
Exactly. It often boils down to our bodies just not being perfectly symmetrical, which, as we've seen, plays a much bigger role than we realize.
Right. Like we're always trying to be symmetrical, but maybe a little wonkiness is just part of being human.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
But here's something else to think about. The article didn't really get into stress. We always think about viruses, bacteria, all that when it comes to sore throats.
Yeah.
But what about plain old tension? Think about it. You're stressed, you're clenching your jaw, your neck muscles tighten up. That can totally lead to a sore throat. And you might feel it more on one side just based on how you hold tension.
That's so true. Wow. So much to think about. This has been fascinating, really. We went from everyday sore throats to the weird stuff and even how stress plays into it. So next time you feel that one-sided ache coming on, remember, our bodies are full of surprises. And sometimes a little knowledge goes a long way. What helps you guys with the sore throat? Share your tips, your grandma's secret remedies, whatever works. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay curious.